Hey guys, I know it's been a while since I last covered a Tales game, but I'm finally back to look at the second of the two R remakes on the PlayStation Vita, and a game I feel like a lot of you are keen to hear my thoughts on, after I've mentioned mixed feelings on this game, both in my review of the DS original and multiple ranking lists. So without further ado, let's dive into 2013's Tales of Hearts R for the PlayStation Vita. Just a reminder that this Tales of Hearts R retrospective was brought to you by my lovely patrons like Cameron, Strauss and Quentin Walker. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content, link in the description below. Development for the PlayStation Vita's second DS Tales remake would initially begin before Tales of Innocence R had even launched. With Innocence R development coming along smoothly, the team figured it would be pretty easy to reuse the assets and engine to remake Tales of Hearts as well. Thus, Tales of Innocence R would release in 2012 with the brand new Tales of Hearts R well in development. With Innocence R's release, the team could now focus all their time on this second DS Tales remake, with Ryuji Odate once again helming the project as producer, and Mitsuki Minamata returning once again to redo the character artwork, as well as including a brand new playable character in the form of Gao Grunner. In fact, Inamata would actually base Gao's design on a photo of Odate wearing sunglasses, which is kind of funny. Regardless, as development of Tales of Hearts R came along, it was quickly decided that the team would ignore the CGI version of the game, with it not being well received by fans, and instead build the game entirely around the 2D anime version. As such, Production IG would be brought back in order to make new cutscenes for the game to go alongside the original game's cutscenes. Alongside the new cutscenes and characters, new story elements would be added into the game, as was the case in Innocence R. This would include several of the cross-gate elements which would end up linking the two games together. Like a lot of previous games, Tales of Hearts R would initially be teased in its predecessor, with Tales of Innocence R's credit ending with the line "to be continued in the next reimagination." While speculation was unsure if this was meant to be a remake of Hearts or another Tales game like Tempest, the speculation would be laid to rest a few months later in the October 2012 issue of Weekly Shonen Jump, revealing that indeed it would be Hearts as getting the next remake. The game itself would launch on the 7th of March 2013. 7 months later, in October 2013, the team would port a slightly cut back version of the game to iOS in order to capitalise on the growing smartphone user base there. Meanwhile, as for a Western release, the team initially had no plans to localise the game, likely in response to neither Tales of Innocence or Tales of Hearts getting any form of a Western release. However, 2013 would see a massive surge in Japanese media thanks to several high-profile anime releases. As for the Tales series, the massive anime surge would also be combined with the successful release of Tales of Grace's F and the Xillia duology for PlayStation 3. As a result, Western Tales fans soon turned their attention to Bandai Namco and began requesting them to release Innocence and Hearts R in the West. Bandai Namco would eventually relent to these demands, announcing an official localization in 2014. Unfortunately, this localization would only be of Hearts R, with sales determining an Innocence R port. Not only was the West only getting half of what it asked for, the localization would be a simple subbing of the game rather than a full English dub, as fans had come to expect in other games in the series. Regardless, Tales of Hearts R would release on the 11th of November 2014 in the US and the 14th in PAL territories. And so, Western fans would finally get to look at their first official release of Tales of Hearts. Tales of Hearts R very much reuses the engine and assets from Tales of Innocence R. This means that unlike the original game, which was in 2D, we now have a full 3D Tales game. To my knowledge, this is the only time a 2D Tales game has been remade in 3D, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. Unlike Innocence, which somewhat needed the HD code of paint to clear up the DS's poor visuals, Tales of Hearts was never a game I had a huge issue with its visuals. In fact, I thought it looked pretty good on the DS. While it's interesting to see the characters as 3D models, I still think that the R Vita games are lacking when it comes to character design. In general, there is a sense of cheapness to the game, which is noticeable in things like how the characters run in giant big strides that make them look ridiculous. While I'm not a big fan of how these R games look, I do appreciate the introduction of new anime cutscenes to the game. However, there's been no reworking of the DS's original cutscenes for the Vita's widescreen display. As a result, we have a jarring difference between the original 4x3 anime cutscenes and the brand new widescreen cutscenes. Once again, this is just another area where I feel like the team has been kinda cheap in this remake. As I mentioned earlier, alongside the new anime cutscenes, we also have the introduction of two new playable characters. One is the previously mentioned Gao Grunner, a mysterious old Somiak who joins the cast early on, in part to fill out the now 4-man battle party. However, as for the second character, we have Chalcedony Ackerman, who is purely an antagonist in the DS original. Chalcedony's move into the party feels rather natural, as his role in the original game was often saw him working with the party, so his move to being playable in the party fits rather well, just like how Finn Schifo was easily added into the party in the PS3 version of Tales of Vesperia. Alongside the new anime cutscenes and characters, we also have the introduction of new dungeons and story moments. The new dungeons are now connected with the traditional overworld instead of the field dungeons and quick travel overworld of the original game. Unlike the quick travel overworld of the DS version, you can in fact encounter monsters on the overworld. Unfortunately, like in Tales of Innocence R, they've gone back to random encounters, which I think I have made my disdain for pretty clear across these Tales retrospectives. We also need to talk about the removal of other things outside of contact encounters and field dungeons. Notably, we now only have a fraction of the non-story related Spiria mazes. We also no longer have the Heal Stone and its special functions. Finally, the game removes the summonable Tales characters from games past due to the new combat system. However, we do have the new Soma leveling up system. Unlike in the DS version, where Somas could be upgraded along 3 different paths, instead we have a system more reminiscent of Zillia's Lilium Orbs, in which each character will have a flower-like Soma with 5 petals, with each petal corresponding to a different stat. By leveling up these petals, you will improve those stats as well as unlock new skills and Soma weapons to use in battle, which I guess I should dive into. For combat, we now have the aerial chase linear motion battle system. As expected, alongside the 3D graphics, we now have a 3D Tales battle system, like the Team Symphonia games. Being in that transition era between Tales of Vesperia and Tales of Systeria, the battle system is a mixture of the classic combo systems from games past and the CC comboing systems of all the future entries. Like in classic Tales combat, we have a side-facing camera and will be able to perform 3 regular attacks on the enemy, with more being possible thanks to skills. Meanwhile, when using arts, characters are now limited to the technical counter, or TC, as well as the series classic technical points, or TP. While arts vary in TP cost, they all cost 1 point of the technical gauge. This means that a single combo, a character can use 3 regular attacks followed by whatever number of arts your TC allows, before needing to stop and wait for your TC to build up again. You can also cycle between arts and regular attacks during a combo as long as you still have regular attacks to make and TC for arts. Being a loose sequel to Tales of Innocence R, we also have the return of the counter system, in which enemies being comboed will occasionally go red and perform a counter attack, which in turn can be countered by pressing the guard button at the right time. Like last time, this will once again cause your character to avoid the attack, counter attack and reset whatever combo they were in. One of the more unique parts of Tales of Hearts' combat has to be in the form of aerial play. Unlike other 3D Tales games, there is a far greater focus on aerial attacks, with characters' jumps often being more floaty, and a lot of the characters' arts being usable in the air as well as on the ground. This somewhat incentivizes jumping into the air and juggling the enemy in a way that we've only really seen in the 2D Tales games. This aerial play takes a whole new level in the game's rather unique chase mechanic. After comboing an enemy for a while, they will occasionally gain a blue circle. If you hit the enemy with the 3rd hit of a regular attack, you'll cause the enemy to be blown away and permanently stunned for a while. You can also perform your 3rd regular attack hit at any time by holding L and pressing the regular attack button. Once the chase is started, you can now press the guard button to teleport straight to the enemy and continue to lay into them. By performing more regular attacks, you can increase the stun time as well as blow the enemy away again through the 3rd hit. This in effect turns the battle system into a Dragon Ball Z fight, and it can look very stylish. Along with being able to chase down the enemy, you can also perform finishing attacks by holding down the attack button after blowing away the enemy. This will cause your character to teleport to the enemy and perform a powerful attack on them. This unfortunately does end the chase and thus should really only be used to finish the enemy off. You can also during a chase perform pair attacks, If your controlled character has good affinity with other members of the battle party, their character portraits might begin to flash. When this happens, you can use the touchscreen to tap on their portrait and summon them in to do a twin attack on the enemy for a lot of damage. We also have a new overlimit system called Spiria Drive, which works almost identical to the one in Tales of Vesperia, in which it is a party-wide gauge which can reach up to 4 levels, with a combo of L and the D-pad determining which level your character will activate. At level 1 you will have increased strength and will no longer have to worry about TC. At level 2 your arts will no longer cost TP. At level 3 you can use Mystic Arts, and at level 4 you'll be completely invincible. Speaking about the characters specifically, I guess I need to talk about the newcomers in Gull and Chalcedony. Gull is a rather jack-of-all-trades character who fights using his Soma Astor, which comes in the form of a small sword and axe. Uniquely, Gull can throw his axe and then proceed to control the axe through additional arts, giving you a somewhat unique range attack. He can also cast a bunch of spells, once again showing just how much of a versatile fighter he is in combat. Chalcedony meanwhile carries over his Soma Warhite from the original game, which gives him both a sword and a set of wings. Obviously being playable this time, Chalcedony can no longer purely fly, instead hovering just above the ground, but can still do some serious comboing in the air thanks to the game's floaty jumps. He also has a series of light and lightning spells. Tales of Innocence and Innocence R's composer, Kazuhiro Nakamura, returns to help recompose the game's original soundtrack alongside original composer Motoi Sakuraba. Now, while certain tracks have grown on me since I last reviewed the original DS game, I still think I stand by my stance that Tales of Hearts has the weakest soundtrack of all the mainline Tales games, with its chaotic electronic music not being very pleasing to me. And while these new remixes do little to sway me from that stance, perhaps if they reorchestrated the tracks to sound more like real instruments instead of keeping the electronic sound, I maybe would have had more appreciation, but alas, I still think it's a pretty weak soundtrack. Alongside the revamped music, we also have the introduction of more voice lines, and while my Japanese isn't good enough to judge whether or not the Japanese voice actors are doing a good job, I can comment on how absurdly poor the English localization team did in their translation. While I might not be fluent, I know enough Japanese to see major discrepancies between the words being spoken and the text appearing on screen. If the dialogue being poorly translated isn't bad enough, we also have to deal with the blatant name changes in the form of characters like Shing and Gadaro being changed to Core and Gull respectively. And that's not the only characters with name changes. As a result, all future media now has been forced to use these incorrect name changes by the Hearts R localizers, which is now a major headache for later localizers who actually do want to properly translate these character names to things like the Tales mobile games. And then to add a cherry on top of this disappointing localization, we also have to talk about the opening cutscene. Unlike Innocence R, which got a brand new widescreen opening, Hearts R chooses to reuse the original opening from the DS, still limited to the 4:3 aspect ratio. Whereas with the game now being on the single screen PS Vita, the coolest part of the opening is lost, as all the twin screen images now need to be condensed down to one single screen. And if this wasn't bad enough, we also have the localizers returning to the old school practice of removing Dean's theme song of Ei no Shita and replacing it with what appears to be a knockoff version of Pachelbel's canon. If I had to describe Tales of Hearts R in one word, it would unfortunately be cheap. On the developer's end, there feels like there's been a lot of corner cutting that wasn't present in Tales of Innocence R, from the reuse of the DS's old cutscenes to the janky animations to the reuse of models from Innocence R. This somewhat poor remake is unfortunately confounded by an even lazier effort from the localization team, who not only changed the names of characters, but clearly didn't bother to stick with the actual dialogue being spoken. There's also the problem that I personally don't think the original Tales of Hearts was a game in desperate need of an upgrade in the same way I feel Tales of Innocence was. In a lot of respect, the team has taken one of the series' best 2D entries and turned it to arguably one of the worst 3D entries. Look, while I might be a bit harsh, I don't think Tales of Hearts R is a complete lost cause of a game. While I think I like the 2D original better, it's kinda nice to see the game's characters and locations now in a full 3D environment, and the combat system can be really fun and how easy it is to do aerial combos. And also, who doesn't like the chase system in which you can just bounce an enemy around like a Dragon Ball Z fighter? It is definitely one of the funnest moments in a Tales combat system. Meanwhile, I also need to point out that while I think this game might be a lazy remake, it's arguably the most Bandai Namco has done with the series' classic entries in the last 15 years, with all other remasters being basically ports to modern systems with minimal upgrades. So I'm at least happy the team tried to do something new here, even though I think they should have just left it as a 2D game. Regardless, we are done with the Vita R games, but not the wider series of remakes, as I still have the multiple remakes of Tales of Fantasia to cover. I'm still debating how best to tackle those remakes, as they all have some unique aspects to them. I also want to dive back into the wider world of Tales spin-offs, with me recently picking up the Tales of the World Narakiri Dungeon games for the Game Boy Advance, so stay tuned for when I next dive into the Tales series, but until then, I'll see you later.